Hi, super fifth grade sleuths. Are you ready to be a detective today and prove your case? I can't wait to hear your great reasoning skills and the facts that you gather. Today, we will be learning to compare and contrast two or more characters, settings, or events in a story. We will do this by identifying text structures the authors use in different texts and draw on specific details in the text. You will be successful by identifying clues, asking questions, and making improving your case. We've practiced comparing and contrasting two or more characters, settings, and events in a story, but you will also be comparing and contrasting this story with chapter 2 of Washed Up. So let's read and then complete your work. Let's look at some text structures before we begin reading, since we will need to identify them in the text and compare them to another text. Description is the first one we'll look at. Is this describing something? For instance, for example, and another are signal words that you would find that are using description. This is a graphic organizer that you might use to identify or describe, per se, characters or something. Sequence is the next text structure. Is this telling me the order of events? That's something that we could ask. That would tell us, that's sequence. Some of the signal words would be first, second, third, after, next, finally, in conclusion. Here is a graphic organizer that you might use for sequence when you're reporting sequence. Another term for sequence could also be chronological order. The next text structure is compare and contrast. The question we would ask, well, is this telling me how something is similar or different to something else? Keywords would be alike, different, both, although, however, whereas. We usually use Venn diagrams to organize our thoughts when we compare and contrast. We don't always have to use a Venn diagram. My guess is that's the one you're most familiar with. The next text structure that we're going to look at is cause and effect. Is it explaining why something happened? Some of the key words would be because, or reason, or therefore. We might even say since. So we would say that these two things caused this to happen. And the last text structure that we're going to look at is problem and solution. The question we would ask is this telling me how a problem needs to be solved? Keywords would be problem, solution, solve, dilemma. Usually a graphic organizer that we use for problem and solution are the two boxes with one looking at here is the solution to the problem. The arrow goes to the solution. So now that we've looked at this, let's go ahead and read our story. The Big Move. Ever since Hannah was an infant, she and her parents had left their tiny city apartment and spent 2 weeks in the country every June. They rented a big old farmhouse on a large farm. Though the farm was no longer in use, there were acres of fields and woods to explore and even a pond for swimming. Hannah considered those 2 weeks at the farm the best 2 weeks of the year. This June, like every other, everyone packed swimsuits, shorts, and hiking shoes and eagerly headed to the country. Hannah could tell something was different, though, because her mom and dad grew especially quiet as they approached the farm. Hannah figured out why when she saw the big for sale sign posted at the end of the gravel driveway. The owners are selling the farm? What will we do next June? Hannah exclaimed. How would you feel about living in the farmhouse all year? Hannah's dad asked. At first, Hannah thought to herself that it sounded fantastic, but then she wasn't so sure. She had lots of questions. How could she make new friends in the country? Where would she go to school? What do people do for fun in the winter? Could she keep taking karate lessons like she did in the city? Those sound like a lot of questions she was asking, doesn't it? Hannah's parents tried to reassure her she would adapt quickly, they explained. Hannah could have friends visit from the city, and she would certainly be able to keep studying karate. Her parents told her they would move before the school year began so that Hannah would have an easier time adjusting. By the end of the week, the decision was finalized. For the next 2 months, Hannah tried to stay positive, but she also made herself a list of all the things she would miss about city life, like the bright city lights at night and all the stores, restaurants, and museums. When moving day came, Hannah was both excited and nervous, just like her parents. During the first week of school, she made a new friend. Soon the girls started riding their bikes together and they registered for the same karate class. Hannah even started to enjoy the quietness of the country. It certainly was not as exciting and busy as the city, but the farm was lovely and the woods were filled with adventures. She could still visit the bright lights and the excitement of the big city. Best of all, living in the country versus a small, cramped apartment in the city gave her the best opportunity of all. Her family adopted a puppy. All right, this is where we will look at how you need to gather your evidence. First thing you will do is gather the evidence. What clues in the text suggest chronological order? Now, remember, I mentioned earlier the text um, structures would include sequence, and sequence is the same as chronological order. So, what clues in the text suggested that it was chronological order? The next thing is ask questions. So, I'd like for you to write down 2 questions you might ask the author about the structures used in the story. Did you see any other structures besides the chronological order? Now, make your case. How is the structure of the big move similar to the structure of chapter 2 of Washed Up? And then, this is where you're going to prove it. This is where you will create your method to show your evidence to your class and teacher. Follow your teacher's instructions and find that evidence. You can do this, super fifth grade sleuths.